found my wife cheating with one called M, and then discovered it was my own brother. When I confronted them, he attacked me. So I pressed charges and filed for divorce. I've been married to Molly for 4 years now, and we've been together for 6 total. And up until about 2 months ago, I thought we had a pretty solid marriage. You know, like we fought sometimes, but nothing major. We had our routines. She'd come home from her job at the accounting firm around 6 most nights, and we'd have dinner and watch Netflix, or whatever normal, boring married couple stuff that I actually liked because it felt stable and comfortable, and I thought she felt the same way. But then things started changing, and at first I told myself I was just being paranoid because that's what I do. I overthink everything. And Molly always used to tease me about it in a loving way, calling me her little worrier and kissing my forehead when I did get anxious about stupid stuff. Except now, when I did mention that something felt off, she'd just roll her eyes and tell me I was being dramatic. And that hurt more than I expected it to because she'd never dismissed my feelings like that before. The changes started small, like she'd work late maybe once a week instead of never, and she'd come home looking tired but also kind of energized, if that makes sense. Like she was tired physically, but mentally she seemed more awake than she'd been in months. And she started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, which was new because she used to leave it charging on the kitchen counter most of the time and wouldn't even look at it until the next morning. I remember the first time I really noticed something was wrong. She came home at almost 9 on a Tuesday, which was weird because Tuesdays are usually their slow days. And when I asked her about it, she said they were working on some big clients' books and it was all hands on deck. But here's the thing. She works for a small firm with like 6 people total, and I've met her co-workers at company parties and stuff, and none of them seemed like the type to stay late unless someone was literally holding a gun to their head, especially not on a Tuesday. So I asked her which client it was, and she got this look on her face like I caught her stealing cookies or something just for a split second before she said it was some manufacturing company she'd never mentioned before. And when I said, "Oh, cool, what do they manufacture?" she just said equipment, and then immediately started asking me about my day and what I wanted for dinner tomorrow, like she was trying to change the subject. That's when the little voice in my head started getting louder. The one that says, "Pay attention, something isn't right here." And I tried to ignore it because I didn't want to be that husband who doesn't trust his wife. But the late nights kept happening more and more, and she started taking calls in the other room and talking really quietly. And when I'd walk in, she'd quickly say, "Okay, talk to you later," and hang up. The phone thing really got to me because Wed had always been pretty open about our phones. Not like we went through each other's stuff, but if hers was closer and mine was ringing, she'd answer it and vice versa. And suddenly she was guarding that thing like it contained nuclear launch codes. She started taking it with her to shower, which was just weird, and she'd sleep with it under her pillow instead of on the nightstand like she had for literally years. And then there was the way she started looking at me. Or maybe I should say not looking at me, because she'd stare off into space during dinner, and when I did ask what she was thinking about, she'd just say work stuff or nothing important. But her eyes looked different, like she was seeing something I couldn't see. And when she did focus on me, it was like she was trying to remember who I was or something. The sex stopped too, which wasn't like her at all because she'd always been the one with the higher drive between us. And when I tried to initiate anything, she'd say she was too tired or stressed about work. And I get that work stress is real, and I didn't want to pressure her, but it had been weeks, and when I tried to talk to her about it, she acted like I was being unreasonable for even bringing it up. I started paying more attention to her schedule and realized the late nights weren't random at all. They were every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork, plus some random other days thrown in. And she started leaving earlier in the mornings too, saying she wanted to get a jump on the day, but her work doesn't even open until 9, and she was leaving by 7:30. That's when I decided to drive by her office one Thursday evening around 7, just to see if there were actually other cars there. And guess what? The parking lot was completely empty except for the security guard's car. No lights on in the building, nothing. So either she was lying about working late or her entire office had decided to work in the dark like some kind of vampire accounting firm. I sat in my car for like 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do with this information. And I felt sick to my stomach because now I knew for sure she was lying to me, but I didn't know what she was actually doing. And part of me wanted to just drive home and pretend I'd never seen the empty parking lot. But I could not know what I knew. You know, when she got home that night around 9:30, I asked her how work was, and she said busy as usual, really draining. And I just nodded and said that sucks. while my heart was pounding because she was looking right at me and lying without even blinking. And I realized I didn't know who this person was anymore. This person who could lie so easily to someone she claimed to love. I started checking her stories more carefully after that. Like when she said she was grabbing lunch with her coworker Jenny. I casually asked about it later, and she'd give me details that didn't quite add up. Like she'd say they went to this Italian place, but then mentioned they had sushi. Or she'd say Jenny was stressed about her divorce, but last time she talked about Jenny, she was happily married. The breaking point came when I found the burner phone, and I'm still not sure if she wanted me to find it or if she just got careless. It was a Tuesday night, and she'd come home late again with that same tired but energized look. And she went straight to the shower like she always did after her late nights. She left her purse on the kitchen counter, and her regular phone was charging on the table. And something made me look in her purse, even though I'd never done that before in our entire relationship. And there it was, this cheap little phone tucked into a side pocket. And my hands were shaking as I opened it up and saw dozens of text messages. The contact was just saved as M. But I scrolled through some of the messages, and my whole world just collapsed right there in the kitchen while I could hear the shower running upstairs. The messages were definitely sexual, talking about meeting up and how they couldn't wait to see each other. And all this stuff about how amazing the previous night was and how they wished they could spend more time together. And there were messages about sneaking around and being careful and making sure nobody found out. And I just kept scrolling and reading these messages between my wife and whoever M was. But here's the thing that really made me sick. Some of the messages referenced things that had happened at our house, like M saying they loved the view from our bedroom window and how comfortable our couch was. So this person had been in my house, in my bed, probably while I was at work or wherever, and Molly had brought them there, and they'd been laughing about it together. I took pictures of some of the messages with my own phone because I knew she'd deny everything if I confronted her without proof. And then I hid the burner phone somewhere in the house and just sat at the kitchen table trying to process what I discovered. The shower was still running, and I could hear her singing like she was happy, and I wanted to throw up. When she came downstairs in her robe with her hair wrapped in a towel, she kissed the top of my head like nothing had happened and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. And I just looked at her and said, "We need to talk." And her whole body went stiff, like she knew exactly what this was about. I told her I found the phone, and I knew she was cheating, and I wanted to know who M was and how long this had been going on. And instead of denying it or crying or apologizing or any of the things I expected, she just got this cold look on her face and said it wasn't what I thought, and I was jumping to conclusions. So I showed her the pictures I'd taken of the messages, and her face went white. But then she got angry instead of ashamed and started yelling at me for going through her personal things and violating her privacy. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you seriously mad at me right now for finding out you're cheating? Like I'm the one who did something wrong here. She kept saying I wouldn't understand, and it wasn't that simple. And there were things about our marriage that I didn't see. And I asked her what the hell that was supposed to mean, because I thought our marriage was fine until she started sneaking around. And she said I was naive if I thought our marriage was fine and that she'd been unhappy for a long time, but didn't know how to tell me. But here's what really pissed me off. She said all this like it justified what she was doing, like being unhappy gave her the right to cheat instead of talking to me about it, or going to counseling, or just leaving if she was that miserable. And when I said that to her, she just rolled her eyes and said I wouldn't have listened anyway, which made me even angrier because she never even tried. I asked her again who M was, and she said it didn't matter and it was over anyway. But I knew she was lying, because some of those messages were from that same day. And I told her I wanted her to call this person right now and end it in front of me. And that's when she really lost it and started screaming about how controlling I was and how she felt like she was suffocating in this marriage. And I'm thinking, okay, if you're suffocating, then why didn't you just leave? Why did you have to cheat and lie and bring someone into our house? But instead, I just asked her if she wanted a divorce because I wasn't going to stay married to someone who was cheating on me and lying about it. She said, maybe that would be best. And then she grabbed the burner phone and went upstairs. And I could hear her talking to someone, but I couldn't make out the words. And I just sat there thinking about how my marriage was ending and how I'd have to tell people and deal with lawyers and split up all our stuff. And I felt empty more than anything else. But then I started getting angry because she was upstairs, probably talking to her affair partner, while I sat downstairs dealing with the aftermath of her choices. And I realized I still didn't know who this person was. And for some reason, That was driving me crazy because I felt like I deserved to know who had helped destroy my marriage. The thing is, I've been having this feeling for weeks that something about this whole situation was familiar. Like I'd seen signs before, but couldn't place them. And some of the messages I'd read mentioned things that made me think this person knew me or knew things about me, which was creepy and confusing. Molly came back downstairs about an hour later and said she was going to stay at her sister's for a few days while we figured things out. And I said fine, because I needed space to think anyway. But as she was packing her bag, I asked her one more time who she was having an affair with, and she just said it didn't matter and I needed to let it go. But I couldn't let it go. And after she left, I started going through everything more carefully, looking for clues about who M could be. I checked our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants on days when she said she was working late. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A receipt from a gift shop for a men's watch that cost $300, dated 2 weeks ago. Molly had never mentioned buying anyone a gift, and I started thinking about who she might be buying expensive gifts for. That's when I decided to set up a camera in our living room. One of those small ones you can hide anywhere. I had a feeling she might bring this person to the house again, and I wanted to know who it was. I know that sounds crazy, but I felt like I was losing my mind not knowing. And I needed proof of her affair and what was happening in my own home. I didn't have to wait long, because 5 days later, while I was at work, the camera picked up Molly coming home with someone. And when I watched the footage that night, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was my brother, Marcus, my older brother, who have looked up to my entire life, who was supposed to be one of my best friends, who had been in my wedding and given a speech about how happy he was that I'd found someone like Molly. I had to watch the footage 3 times before it really sank in. Seeing them come into my house together and kiss in my living room, and then go upstairs to my bedroom. My brother, who I talked to at least twice a week, who I'd trusted with everything, was the one sleeping with my wife. And suddenly everything made sense. Why some of those text messages referenced things about me and my schedule. Why Molly seemed to know exactly when I'd be gone. Why this person felt comfortable in my house. Marcus knew all my routines, knew when I worked late, knew when I went to the gym, knew everything about my life because I told him everything. I realized they'd probably been planning this for months, finding ways to be alone together. And I thought about all the times Marcus had come over when Molly was home alone, all the times had offered to help her with things when I was busy. The worst part was remembering how supportive Marcus had been when I started having doubts about Molly's behavior, telling me I was probably overthinking things and that all marriages go through rough patches. Had been gaslighting me while sleeping with my wife, making me feel crazy for noticing things that were actually happening. I spent the whole night just sitting in my living room, staring at the spot where I'd watched them kiss. I kept thinking about how they'd both looked at me during family dinners and holidays, knowing what they were doing behind my back. And I thought about how they probably talked about me, maybe even laughed about how clueless I was. By morning, I'd decided I was going to confront both of them. And I called Molly and told her she needed to come home because we needed to finish our conversation. I didn't mention that I knew about Maris because I wanted to see if she'd finally tell me the truth. But I also texted Maris and asked him to come over because I needed to talk to him about something important. Molly got there first, and she seemed nervous, asking WHYT insisted she come back, and if I'd been going through her stuff. Again. And I just said I knew who M was, and I wanted her to admit it. And she got that same cold look and said she wasn't going to play games with me. That's when Marcus showed up. And he'll never forget the look on his face when he saw Molly there and realized something was wrong. He tried to act normal, asking what was going on and if everything was okay, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I looked at both of them standing in my living room and said, I know you're sleeping together. I have proof. And I want both of you to confess or get out of my house right now. And Molly started to say something, but Marcus cut her off and said, we should all calm down and talk about this like adults. And that's when I lost it, because he was still trying to manipulate me, even after being caught. Still trying to control the situation and make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. I told him he was a piece of shit for sleeping with my wife and that I never wanted to see either of them again. Marcus got this look on his face like I'd slapped him. And then he said I was being dramatic and that things weren't as simple as I was making them out to be. And I said, oh really? Please explain to me how sleeping with your brother's wife is complicated because I'm apparently too stupid to understand. That's when Molly jumped in and said they hadn't meant for it to happen and that they tried to stop, but they had feelings for each other that they couldn't control. And I just started laughing because that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. Like they were victims of their own emotions instead of two adults who made choices. I told them both to get out, and Marcus said, "We needed to talk about this as a family." And I said, "We're not family anymore. You made sure of that when you decided to fuck my wife." And that's when he got aggressive, stepping closer to me and saying I needed to watch my mouth and show some respect. And I'm thinking, respect? You want me to show you respect after what you've done? And I told him to get away from me before I did something we'd both regret. But instead of leaving, he got right in my face and said I was always such a drama queen and that maybe if I'd been a better husband, Molly wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. That's when he pushed me, and I stumbled backward into the coffee table and I pushed him. And then Molly was yelling at both of us to stop. And Marcus was saying I started it, and I was saying, "Get the fuck out of my house." Marcus grabbed me by the shirt and shoved me against the wall. And I could smell his cologne and see the watch Molly had bought him on his wrist. And something just snapped in me. I started fighting back, throwing punches and trying to get him off me. And he was bigger than me, but I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life. We ended up on the floor with him on top of me, hitting me in the face and ribs while Molly screamed at us to stop. And I kept thinking, this is my brother, this person I loved and trusted, and he's beating me up in my own living room while my wife watches. And the whole time he was hitting me, he was saying things like, "This is what you get for being such an asshole, and you brought this on yourself." I managed to get away from him and run to the kitchen where I grabbed a knife, not because I wanted to stab him, but because I wanted him to back off and leave me alone. And when he saw the knife, he finally stopped advancing on me. But then he started saying I was crazy and dangerous, and that he was going to call the police on me. And I'm standing there bleeding and holding a knife in my own kitchen while my cheating wife and brother act like I am the problem. And I realized how completely fucked up this whole situation had become. So I put the knife down and told them both to get out and never come back. And that I was filing for divorce and never wanted to see either of them again. Marcus said I was making a huge mistake and that family was more important than this. And I said, "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy mine." And then they finally left, but not before Molly said she'd be back for her things and that I better not do anything stupid. After they were gone, I just sat on my kitchen floor and cried because my marriage was over and my relationship with my brother was over. And I felt like my whole life had been a lie. And I realized the camera had recorded everything, including Marcus assaulting me in my own home. And I decided right then that I was going to press charges. I know everyone thinks I should have just let it go and tried to work things out as a family. Thank you to everyone who commented, especially those who told me I'm not crazy for feeling like my whole world got turned upside down. Reading all your responses has helped me realize that I'm not overreacting and that what happened to me was seriously fucked up, even if my family doesn't want to admit it. A lot of people asked for updates, so here's what's happened since I posted first. The harassment from my family has gotten worse, not better. My mom calls me every single day, crying and begging me to drop the charges, saying that Marcus has learned his lesson and that I'm destroying our family over something that can be fixed with time and forgiveness. And my dad, who I thought might understand better, told me yesterday that I'm being stubborn and prideful and that real men don't call the police on their brothers over family disputes. He said I should have just beaten Marcus up and called it even. Like this is some kind of Old West movie where we settle things with our fists instead of, expecting people not to cheat with our wives and then assault us. My sister has been the worst though, calling me selfish and saying that I'm putting my hurt feelings above the good of the whole family. She said Molly and Marcus are both sorry and that they're willing to do whatever it takes to make things right, and that I'm being unreasonable by not even listening to them. But here's the thing that really gets me. None of them seem to understand that this isn't just about hurt feelings or family drama. Marcus committed assault. There's video evidence of it. And if he did this to a stranger on the street, everyone would expect him to face consequences. But because he's my brother and because it happened during a family situation, suddenly I'm supposed to just let it slide. The other thing is that people keep acting like Molly and Marcus just made a mistake, like they tripped and fell into bed together by accident. But this was going on for months, probably longer, and they were planning and scheming and lying to my face the whole time. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of deliberate choices to hurt me and betray my trust. I've been staying at a hotel since the confrontation because I couldn't handle being in that house anymore, and Molly has been going there to get her stuff while I'm at work. My neighbor texted me yesterday to tell me she saw Marcus helping Molly move boxes, and I just felt sick knowing that they're still together and probably talking about what an asshole I am for not just accepting their relationship. The divorce is moving forward, and my lawyer says it should be pretty straightforward since we don't have kids and most of our assets are in my name anyway. Molly hasn't fought me on anything yet, which makes me think she feels guilty, but it also makes me wonder if she's just eager to get it over with so she can be with Marcus without any complications. The hardest part is how isolated I feel because the people who are supposed to support me during the worst time of my life are instead pressuring me to forgive the people who hurt me. And I keep second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I am being too stubborn or if I should just drop the charges and try to move on. But then I watch that video again, and I see Marcus hitting me in my own living room while Molly just stands there, and I remember how scared I felt and how helpless, and I know I can't just pretend that didn't happen. He could have killed me if he'd hit me the wrong way. And he didn't stop until I got the knife, which means he would have kept going if I hadn't defended myself. Some people in the comments asked about the burner phone and what happened with that. I turned it over to my lawyer as evidence for the divorce. My lawyer said some of the messages could be considered evidence of alienation of affection, which might help my case, but honestly, I don't even want to read them because I think they just hurt more. I also found out that Marcus has been telling people his side of the story, claiming that I attacked him first and that he was just defending himself. But the video clearly shows him pushing me first and then getting on top of me and hitting me repeatedly. So I don't know how he thinks that's going to work in court. The thing that's really messing with my head is how normal they both acted around me while this was going on. Like Marcus came to my birthday dinner 2 months ago and gave me a card talking about how glad he was to have me as a brother the whole time he was sleeping with my wife and Molly, planned our anniversary dinner, and acted all romantic and loving, and then went and met Marcus the next day. My cousin also called me and said he'd heard about everything through the family grapevine, and he told me that he'd always thought something was weird between Molly and Marcus, but didn't he want to say anything because he was sure. And I'm like, thanks for looking out for me, bro. Really appreciate you keeping your suspicions to yourself while I was being humiliated. The court date is in 3 weeks, and my lawyer says we're well prepared, but I'm nervous about seeing Marcus again and having to relive everything in front of a judge. Part of me just wants to get it over with, but another part of me wants him to face real consequences for what he did, not just a slap on the wrist. I've been going to therapy to help deal with all this, and my therapist says what I'm experiencing is normal given the level of betrayal Eve suffered. She said it's common for families to pressure victims to forgive and move on because it's easier for them than dealing with the reality of what happened. That doesn't mean I have to comply with their wishes. She also said that the fact that Marcus escalated to physical violence shows that this isn't just about an affair. It's about someone who was willing to hurt me to protect his secret. And when I put it that way, it makes me feel more confident that I'm doing the right thing by pressing charges. I know this update is kind of all over the place, but my head is still spinning from everything that's happened. I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm hanging in there and that I'm not backing down, even though it feels like the whole world is against me right now. The support from strangers on here has meant more to me than you know, because it's helped me realize that I'm not crazy and that I deserve better than what my family is trying to get me to accept. So thank you for that, and I'll update again after the court date to let you know how everything goes.